Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Now, in other news, as we were talking about earlier, then I guess the overall attitudes towards journalists, and we'll get into that a little bit more with the FBI from another angle. But right now, I want to talk about a former CIA operative, and she was giving tips to journalists on how to uncover information and also how to view information in the first place.
In Iraq or Syria, and ask anybody why America dropped bombs. You get, they were waging war on Islam. And you walk in America and you ask, why were we attacked on 9/11? And you get, they hate us because we're free. Those are stories manufactured by a really small number of people on both sides who amass a great deal of power and wealth by convincing the rest of us to keep killing each other.
It's always interesting to me, the flow of information. And I remember when I went to college, they made us watch this video or two movies, as a matter of fact. And at the time, I didn't really understand why we were watching these. I kind of felt like the instructors were wasting our time, just giving us a day we didn't have to do any work. But now I understand them so much better. They were Wag the Dog and also Network. You guys have probably seen Network. It's in our promo pieces for the Alex Jones Show. But basically, those two films, and there are many other books, propaganda, other things out there that you can read, that talk about the control of information and how you're being manipulated into something. For example, in Wag the Dog, they're trying to sell people this phony war. So they brought in this big-time Hollywood producer to pretty much manufacture a war of sorts to get people to buy into it. And that's what you see a lot on your news channels. It's not so much a war, but they want you to buy into a certain way of thinking. I love the old Saturday Night Live sketch where they do the Schoolhouse Rock, but it's basically talking about how, I believe it was NBC, it's Saturday Night Live on NBC, is funded by a bunch of defense contractors. They don't want you to know that they're funded by a bunch of defense contractors. Meanwhile, they're propping up the war. Just basic things like that. So it's a new way for you to view information. It just helps you, kind of like in the movie They Live, put on the glass and then just see the propaganda for what it is. Now, as we're talking about censorship of journalists and how the FBI reacts to that, now we see secret rules make it pretty easy for the FBI to spy on journalists. The classified rules obtained by The Intercept and dating back to 2013 govern the FBI's use of national security letters, which allow the Bureau to obtain information about journalists' calls without going to a judge or informing the news organization being targeted. They have previously been released only in heavily redacted form. Media advocates said the documents show that the FBI imposes few constraints on itself when it bypasses the requirements to go to court and obtain subpoenas or search warrants. That's exactly right. When you have a target, you're supposed to have probable cause. I'm looking at this person on this date and this activity for this reason. You can't just say, I feel like looking up Bob over here, so I'm gonna go tap his phones or whatever it is that they do. That is illegal. And I know they have this holier than thou thing where I don't need permission of a judge to look at your documents because I'm fighting national security. Well, if you stop looking at all the journalist files and actually go look at the suspected terrorist, you may prevent some terrorist activity, but that makes too much sense. You guys are gathering all this metadata, not just FBI, but NSA, whoever else. They have all this mundane metadata on normal people who are looking up, Googling pressure cookers or buying backpacks, and they got all this stuff. Meanwhile, the terrorists are running wild out here, not just in this country, but all around the world because you guys have this congested apparatus. We can't even get to the information that you really need to keep the people safe. And this is a case in point of that. A suspected terrorist, the Istanbul terrorist Mastermind, was a refugee protected by the EU. The Chechen national was on a Russian terrorism watch list since 2003, but received asylum in Austria after he claimed he was severely tortured and under persecution by Russian authorities. He was later arrested in Sweden after Kalashnikov assault rifles, explosives, ammunition were found in his car, but he only spent over a year in jail. Russia again tried to extradite him later as he was crossing the border between Turkey and Bulgaria, but human rights groups pointed to his refugee status in Austria to block Moscow from getting their man. Yeah, if you guys also remember, who else was from Chechnya? The Boston bombers, or at least the older brother, going to various terrorist training camps, and DHS calls us, or the Russian calls DHS, and they're saying, hey, you might want to watch out for this our name, go like, yeah, we got it, and we all know what happened later. Regardless of what you think about that whole official narrative, the point is that Russia was warning us, and Russia, the country we don't have the best of relations with, saw somebody who was such a serious threat in their mind that they picked up the phone and called us to warn us about it, but nobody really did anything. A similar thing with this guy, because they were more concerned with being politically correct. They said this guy is a refugee. He needs to be protected from those evil Russians, even though this guy clearly was a danger even before the most recent terror attack. And this is the reason why I'm a fan of border security. I'm not going to say a wall. I think the wall will be largely ineffective, but it may have its uses in some places. But regardless, when I meet these people, they say, well, you should just have free open borders. Anybody can come in and out. I think once you're in the United States, you should be able to travel unmolested, no checkpoints, nothing like that. But to have a border at Mexico, have a border at Canada, international waters, yeah, I think those are there for a reason. And now it's getting to the point where even Uber drivers are getting suckered into this. And we see smugglers use Uber-registered drivers to move migrants to U.S. border. And this is back on June 10th. 5 vehicles carrying 34 Central American migrants were apprehended while traveling together. And to be perfectly clear, when we went out to the border earlier this week and we met the family out there, it's about 20 or so people, traveling together, mostly women and children. I have no issue with those people. My beef is not with them. They came from El Salvador. They were walking for 2 months. They ran out of provisions, water, food, whatever. They just had the clothes on their backs when they got here. I have no issue with people coming to the country. I do believe that you should do so legally, but if they find a legal reason or legal avenue to do that, fine. Welcome to America. My issue is the guys like we just talked about right here. You have these free open systems where these guys can just walk in. The Border Patrol says they get maybe 40% of the people who come across the border. How many guys like this could there be in the United States of America right now? That's why you have a border system. That's why you have customs. That's why you have the Border Patrol checkpoints at Mexico. Not in the country. I don't want to go to the checkpoint that's 100 miles inland where they ask me if I'm a American citizen and, looking in the back at a Don because he's a brown-skinned gentleman. That's not my bag. But, at the border, that's what I like, not the stuff that's going on here currently. And one of the things going on at the border is, of course, we're sending guns out. But now, what about guns in the country? Now we see an anti-gun senator was arrested in Ferguson for carrying a 9mm. Long story short, she was supposedly, allegedly, reportedly intoxicated. The cops wanted her to do a breathalyzer. She refused, and she was officially charged with failure to obey a lawful order of police and walking in the roadway. It's a very interesting thing because we always see these anti-gun senators, congressmen like that guy out there in California who got arrested for running all those guns, and other guys around the country, they get arrested with guns, but they don't want you to have one because they think you're just as crazy as they are. Moving quickly now, talking about guns, ISIS is gunning down Christians in Egypt, but nobody cares because that's politically correct for them to do so. If a Christian man shot somebody else of another religion, it would be an international sensation, but they killed the gentleman. Also a Hindu priest was killed back on June 7th, and you didn't hear anything about that because it's not politically correct to talk about that. And briefly, before we go to break, come back with more special reports. Milo, you guys recall him, Joe Biggs, and he traveled around the country going to various rallies. Milo is going to hold a gay pride parade in Sweden, Swedish Muslim ghetto, because I don't know if you guys saw the report that Biggs, Leanne, and our new hire, Margaret, did, talking about the rape-free bracelets. And when you go to these countries, just hold up your thing, they won't rape you or attack you. It's a complete joke, so he's going to go there to point that out, as well as other things. Stay tuned after this for more special reports.
We celebrate the 4th of July as a reminder of earning our independence from a tyrannical and oppressive government. Just a reminder to the Obama administration, there's plenty of room on the calendar for another holiday.
FEMA FEMA is talking about food prices going up 395% potentially. We got the Pentagon report predicting a meltdown coming around 2017. We've got Kissinger talking about a food as a weapon and using it. We've got Soros talking about EU collapse. Trump talking about bubbles. Ron Paul. Most of the grain in many countries being turned into ethanol for cars when we got plenty of oil. Venezuela food prices are up to $150 for 1 dozen eggs. Brazil is in financial crisis. The UN's announcing that it basically runs our southern border. This is insane. All of these policies being set by the globalists. Governments and elites are stockpiling food and weapons and building bunkers. I know I personally am getting prepared. The warning signs are insane, and that's why we're offering some of the biggest specials ever at InfoWarsStore.com right through the July 4th special weekend of 20 to 40% off. The biggest wide spectrum sale ever on preparedness items, 20 to 40% at InfoWarsStore.com.